How you doing, guys? Quick little intro on this interview with documentary filmmaker Matthew Tannam-Elgie. He has the documentary Mothman, the film that never was. And yeah, so I just want to make this intro because we talk about his documentary the whole time, and because we don't want to give away the whole thing. There's certain things we allude to. It's a great conversation, but you might hear this going like, well, I want to find out what the fuck happened. Go to Matt's Substack on September 21st, commendablecommotion.substack.com. It'll be posted there. It's only $5. Because, yeah, I love the interview. I think we had a great time. But if you hear it and you want to hear more, go watch the documentary. Matt let me watch it. It's really good. commendablecommotion.substack.com. $5, September 21st. Check it out. And, yeah, enjoy the interview. Bye-bye.
That was partly because the sort of Neverhood stuff was just so fascinating to me from a kind of almost like a kind of outsider's perspective, because I don't remember the 1990s very much, if at all, but it was just so fascinating seeing these videos of them making it and seeing footage of the game. I played one of the other games they made more recently. It was kind of a spiritual sequel. It was called Armacrog, and that was also made with clay. But so you remember the Neverhood, like actually back in the day in Earthworm Jim and all that?
I remember Earthworm Jim, and there was like one or two games that I like vaguely remember. I didn't know that I wasn't nerdy about games back in the day, so I wouldn't have known like the studios out, the big studios like Activision and Neversoft and things. Like I know that, but I wouldn't have known these like small indie studios like that.
Yeah, yeah, no, they're a very creative bunch, and but they were very well connected too. Steven Spielberg, these sorts of people, Bonnie Curtis, Jeffrey Katzenberg was sort of somewhere there in the background. It was fascinating, really, just seeing the stuff these guys are coming out with, and unfortunately, the whole plan to make a horror movie in West Virginia and fly over there, make a little mini budget horror film about the Mothman legend. It didn't really go according to plan, as you probably saw. Like it just, wasn't as simple and easy as they thought it would be. They knew it was going to be tough, but they weren't expecting the sort of kind of frightening things that they ended up running into in West Virginia. They weren't expecting any of that. None of it at all, no.
Yeah. No, it was very interesting. No, I do got to give you props. Because I don't know about the Ohio mob I didn't know about the Ohio mafia or anything like that. So I didn't see it. It was like, because of the Mothman shit, I thought it was going to go supernatural. And then when it like didn't at all, I was like, that's actually like, that's like a fun twist on the twist you think is going to happen.
Yeah, and I'll leave quite a lot of it for Sunday when the doc comes out on my Substack for monthly subscribers, just for a little $5 subscription. So I won't be giving too much away today, but I will definitely give you guys a taste of, the sort of bizarre stuff that is revealed in the documentary without being boasting too much about it. Like, there's stuff in this documentary that has just never been reported before. The most I could find was a single line in a local Wheeling, West Virginia newspaper that mentions something about, like, a drug runner who was the Pittsburgh Mafia's guy in West Virginia. His name was Paul No Legs Hankish. I don't know how much you want to get into this, but his name was Paul No Legs Hankish. He had his legs blown off. And he was running drugs, running illegal gambling and prostitution, all this kind of stuff. And one article in a series of 10 from like 2015, very, very good series of articles called The Wheeling Mob, just mentioned, oh yeah, and Paul Hankish, traveled to places like, Bel Air, Ohio, and Weirton, West Virginia, and this and that and the other. And then somewhere in there was Point Pleasant, West Virginia, just mentioned briefly. That was basically it. And I was like, oh, because this was after I'd started interviewing the people for this documentary, Mothman, the film that never was. And it clicked in my head, the stuff that some of these guys from California were telling me about, that they encountered in Point Pleasant. When I read that thing from the article in 2015, I thought, okay, there might actually be something to this. Not that I disbelieved them, but I was just trying to keep an open mind. So that was corroboration right there. I was pleased I found that, because that set me off on this journey.
Yeah, I'm very. So, you want to just get? Are you cool if this is the interview, or you want to just get going?
Oh yeah, sure. You can start whenever you want from when you started recording. I don't mind at all. One thing I will say is that there's a wasp in the room, and by that I don't mean the acronym. I mean literally a buzz kind of thing, that stings you. But that's all right because I don't have a phobia. But if you see me waving my hand to try and get it out the window, that'll be why. So
Okay. Hell
yeah,
yeah. All
no.
right. So yeah, I hit record because we were already having such a good conversation. So why exist in real life when we could record it and put it on video? But yes, we have Matthew. Apologies if I fuck your last name.
Uh,
Tannam-Elgie?
yeah,
I
you got it. Actually, that's
Oh
absolutely
really?
correct. Yeah, you got it in one. That's unusual. That's unusual.
Okay. I was gonna say I might look pretty Irish, but I don't. No, I've never been there culturally, none of that. So it's all just me doing my best. But yeah, we linked up because you hit me up because you heard my Ken Silva interview. You had on your podcast Commendable Commotion. You had that really cool. It was like a couple parts where you were talking about Ken and his reporting on the Trump assassination attempt.
Yeah, part two isn't out yet. I'm looking forward to putting that together. It'll take a while, but part one came out on July 13th of this past year. And yeah, it was about Ken's journey to Pennsylvania, getting the autopsy report and all that of Thomas Matthew Crooks.
Yeah.
Very strange figure who we still don't know a whole lot about, but the podcast did reveal some stuff about his background, which was kind of fascinating for me as well when I found it. And Ken has also revealed a lot through his research about Crooks's background. So that was how I found your show, and I was really impressed. I listened to a few more episodes, liked the format of it, thought that this would be a good place to,
Yeah.
kind of help people understand the stuff that's going to be revealed on Sunday when Mothman, the film that never was, comes out.
Yes, and that's what we are talking about. Mothman, the film that never was, comes out this Sunday on your Substack. You said.
Yeah, for monthly subscribers, there in my Substack, Commendable Commotion. Yeah.
Okay, and yeah. Matt gave me a little preview on the documentary. It's very good. I think you guys are gonna like it. Let's start here real quick because I think when people say, because obviously I don't want you to give away the whole story because then why would they want to watch the doc? But a lot of people are going to see Mothman and they're thinking like, is this the Mothman? What was it? Prophet? Whatever the movie was, the Mothman. I
Yeah.
forget. They're going to think it's that or whatever the fuck, but it's actually a little bit different than what you would expect from the Mothman. So I'll give you the floor. Give the people a quick little breakdown on what the doc is, what's going on in the doc.
Well, the doc is about a crew of indie filmmakers in 1997 who went to the town of Point Pleasant, West Virginia. They flew there all the way from Los Angeles. Though they were indie filmmakers, independent filmmakers, they were very connected to people in DreamWorks. They were a company called the Neverhood, and a lot of them came from that company. They were headed by the guy who created Earthworm Jim, which is a very well known video game and cartoon franchise for kids. He made a thing called the Neverhood after that, sort of stop motion animation video game. Doug TenNapel is his name, Doug TenNapel. And he wanted to make a movie after the Neverhood video game. And so the supernatural legend of the Mothman was one that he was really drawn to, understandably. So he brought a lot of his crew out there from the Neverhood to make a film. They were going to have fun. They were going to, do the usual challenges you'd expect when making a mini budget kind of film in an unknown place. But the problem was back then, Point Pleasant, West Virginia, it wasn't the place it is today. It was a lot more unknown than it is today. And there were some very dark things happening there. Nothing silly, as you pointed out earlier. Nothing supernatural, as far as we know. But some rather bad people who were taking advantage of the economic deprivation the town used to be in back in 1997. So that was why Doug and his crew went out there. And my documentary tells the story of their experience in Point Pleasant uh, and the frightening things they ran into. A town which is now famous, of course, because of the Mothman Museum, Mothman Festival, happening this Sunday as well. So it was so different back then, and it's very dark side historically of a very, very well known tourist destination.
Yeah. So One thing I was thinking about the whole time while I was watching it, where so like you live in Ireland, correct?
Yeah.
And I was just like the two things I know that you've created are about like American politics or America. And the one thing I was finding so interesting, I was like, is it hard? Because I'm assuming you didn't come over here and shoot your own B-roll and stuff. Is it like, is it hard making a documentary about America when you're not actually in America?
Not as hard as you'd think. Now, for the Mothman documentary, I did actually travel to Point Pleasant, West Virginia,
Oh,
to
really?
shoot my own footage, shoot my own interviews, with locals, things like that. That was in the summer of 2023.
Oh,
And
okay.
yeah, so that was quite an experience, and that was something else. That was very interesting, and the locals were able to corroborate a lot of the stuff that the crew from Los Angeles told me about. I just asked them general questions about the town. I didn't want to lead them anywhere, the locals, and gradually it came out when they were talking to me about what was happening in those days in 90s, 80s, 70s, all the way back to the 60s. It only ended in the early 2000s, as far as we know, the nefarious stuff that was going on there back in the day.
Is that tough, like interviewing people like that? Like, how do you just like go up to people and go like, "Hey, how you doing?" like, I tried doing
Um,
I tried doing like a man on a street video one time when I was like younger, and I felt so uncomfortable. So when I see people like you having to do that job, I go, I don't know how you do it.
I think it's probably easier when it's a very, very small town where things are, some would maybe say, a lot more personable. And I like big cities. I actually feel more comfortable personally often in big cities rather than small places. But in a small town, everyone kind of knows each other.
Yeah.
And if you are just some stranger randomly making conversation, depending on what you say, it's maybe not as weird and awkward as one may think. Now, that being said, I was very upfront about what I was doing in the town. I did say, look, I'm making a little documentary just about Point Pleasant in the 90s, basically, and a film crew who came over. Could I get your perspective of what it was like back then? So it was clear immediately why I was there. I didn't kind of just, hey, what's up? Want a coffee kind of thing. It wasn't. That'd be very strange. It was
Mm.
no, it was a lot more upfront than that. So it wasn't too difficult. No, not too difficult.
Okay. And when you were in, I think you kind of mentioned it before, but when you were in Point Pleasant yourself, did you get any of like, because I know it's like they have the Mothman Festival. I saw that at one point. They have like, it's such a different place now. Was there still any remnants of like the weird vibes and stuff?
I mean, I think with any place that has a dark history, there's always a weird vibe. If you're particularly sometimes if you're aware of it when you're walking
Yeah.
around somewhere, exactly. Even if you're not aware of it, sometimes it can be a strange vibe. But in this case, I was aware of it, and I mean, yeah, there's a weird vibe because of that. There's also a weird vibe because it is the town where the weirdness in the, over the years with the completely, as far as I know, unrelated stuff happened with the Mothman legend, as depicted in the Richard Gere film, The Mothman Prophecies, which kind of made the town famous. And that's when they started the festival, that kind of thing. If you're aware of all that, yeah, that immediately kind of creates a weird vibe in people's heads. But in terms of a dangerous vibe, if that maybe also might be what you mean, no, I didn't. I mean, no more than any normal small town. I found it incredibly safe, at least as a tourist. Within reason. Certainly, you hear things. Certainly, you hear things, but you know, mostly stuff that you'd hear in any small town these days.
Mm.
Just back in the day, though, Doug TenNapel's crew heard things that were not very normal, and certainly, I can say as much that like they were told the town in 1997 was a hot spot for the Ohio Mafia.
Yeah.
Some people would say the Pittsburgh Mafia was, depending on who they talked to, it was either one or the other. Some people said Cleveland, some people said Ohio generally, some people said Pittsburgh. Through doing a lot of research and through interviewing the locals, uh, I generally tend to think that the Pittsburgh mob were the ones spearheading a lot of the stuff that was going on in Point Pleasant back then. Most people in Point Pleasant weren't involved in this. It was just a few select people back then who were. Um, Unfortunately, like I can't identify the ones who were locals of Point Pleasant because they, their relatives are still alive, some of their children, that kind of thing. So I was a bit, a little bit nervous about showing the film at the Mothman Festival last year when it premiered, but I just made sure to, cover my bases and don't identify anyone where there's no proof, kind of thing. Only stick to things you can prove. For
Yeah.
litigious reasons as well, for legal reasons, obviously. So,
Well,
yeah.
that was one of the most entertaining parts when you were interviewing the locals, and like they had this wholesomeness to them, but what they were excluding from what they were talking about, or like the vagueness that they were describing things, you were like, oh yeah, some real shit goes down here, like could go down here, because he's like, it was like, yeah, he's like, there's some guys who are up to no good, and I'll leave it at that. And you're like, oh my god, what happened here?
Yeah, yeah. Even to this day, like, and that's also because they similarly, like I said, they don't want to identify members of the family who are still around. Some of them, but also because there is an element of fear. There is obviously an element of, look, I don't want to get in any trouble with etc. So there is an element of fear in the locals' reactions as well, which you can see in the documentary when they're describing the stuff that went down there in relation to organized crime, and it was fascinating, and I really made some great friends there in Point Pleasant. Actually, one or two very close friends of mine now who we've worked together on this for a while, and I'm very very grateful. Mark Lopez and Jan Haddocks, particularly, and also the Finley family who owned the hotel there until recently. They were all very helpful, as were others. And so, I was very grateful for their help. And some of them corroborated stuff that the Los Angeles crew from the neighborhoods were telling me. Jan Haddocks, in particular, knew a lot. He knew a lot. And you'll hear, I mean, obviously, your listeners might be listening to this and not know who I'm referring to, but you'll hear him in the documentary describing what he says were the mafia in Point Pleasant during all the way from the 60s to the early 2000s. You'll hear that in the documentary, and a lot of other locals too. So it's a weird story. But are there any sort of examples I can give you and your listeners, perhaps, of some of the weirdness that was going on? Or would you like to talk more about the film crew themselves? What would you prefer?
Definitely weirdness, because that was like a big proponent. That was a really interesting part of the documentary. Was the whole time you're watching it, it felt like simple, like we're doing the movie. It felt straightforward, but there was, even in the doc, there was that air of weirdness that they were describing in the town. So I would actually, let's go there, because I do want to ask about, I am just curious about like production and the nuts and bolts of making a documentary, but let's talk about the weirdness, then we can go into the other stuff later.
Sure. From briefly looking over my notes just there, because it's been a while since I looked back at them, there are a couple of anecdotes that aren't in the documentary, which will maybe give people a taste of the strange things that were going on there in Point Pleasant before it became the tourist hotspot that it is today because of the Mothman Museum and Festival and Richard Gere movie. In the 70s, for example, there was a guy, I think his last name was Rowlands, and he was found dead in the woods near his house in the Point Pleasant area. And he had been shot, I think, 5 times in the back of the head.
Jesus.
Nothing came of this, to the best of my knowledge. Police were investigating. No one had been found by the time his funeral came around locally. No one had been convicted, as far as I know. I don't know if they found whoever did
Is
it.
this one of those towns with like 3 cops? Is it like that vibe out there?
A little bit, but more than, I mean, they had a substantial police force for a small town.
Okay. Okay.
Seemed relatively well organized to me. I mean, from talking to the locals, from interviewing some local officials, from doing my research, seems relatively well stocked. But there's just a lot of unanswered questions about the town's history.
Okay.
Uh, so that was kind of curious. No one knows who killed Bernard. I think his name was Bernard. Was it Alan? Something like that. Bernard or Alan Rowlands. And I remember his last name. And I don't think they ever caught who did it. Now, that's just one incident.
Yeah.
In and of itself, it's not, sadly, these things happen. Some of the locals were saying on actually a private Facebook group for West Virginia residents, um, digging through old comments while preparing to release this film. I did come across some locals saying that they heard it may have been because of some sort of, I guess, mob people who were in the area who, for whatever reason, wanted Bernard Rowlands dead, or for whatever reason, this guy may have angered the mob. They weren't specific, but they said, look, I heard it may have been something shady going on in relation to crime and organized crime. And so when I read that, like, this was fairly recently, but I thought, there we go. That's even more anecdotal evidence that something along the lines of the mafia was happening in Point Pleasant back in the day. Another incident was a fella named Jesse Anderson, which, if anyone's from the kind of West Virginia, Ohio area, Pennsylvania, they might be familiar with the story of Jesse Anderson, but no one really knows his connection to Point Pleasant. He was a mafia associate. He was an associate of the Pittsburgh mob, and their lead man in West Virginia was Paul No Legs Hankish. No legs, because he had his legs blown off in an attempted assassination. Jesse Anderson was one of Hankish's right hand men, and he was involved, I think, in drug running and illegal gambling, all this kind of thing. Jesse Anderson, one day in the 80s, decided to drive all the way from Wheeling, West Virginia, all the way down to Point Pleasant, West Virginia, and then through Point Pleasant to Gallipolis, Ohio, or Gallipolis, I don't know how you pronounce it. And that's just across the river, right across the river, facing Point Pleasant. Apparently, he went all the way there just to rob someone,
Oh,
from what the
Jesus.
newspapers seem to indicate. He was shot dead in self-defense. He died. That was the last we heard of it. The guy wasn't charged, was acting in self-defense, it was reported. I've been told by some locals, and this is quite new, that Jesse Anderson was involved with the mafia activity. Well, sorry, no, we know that because it was reported anyway, but I was told by some locals he was in Point Pleasant because of that activity, i.e., stolen goods, illegal gambling, potentially. For all I know, maybe the drug running as well. There's been talk of that as well happening back then in Point Pleasant as well. I was told by at least one local who knew Jesse Anderson quite well that his understanding is that Jesse Anderson came to Point Pleasant for that reason, because of the operations locally the mafia were running in Point Pleasant at the time. So he came there many times, Jesse Anderson did, to Point Pleasant, from what I've been told, including by actually another person who told me that was an official, a local official from Point Pleasant, and he's in the documentary. So yeah, and those are just two incidents that kind of give a little taste of the sort of stuff that's going to be talked about in my documentary, that this crew from all the way over in Los Angeles ran across when they just were there to make a funny little horror movie in the 90s, and they weren't expecting this. And it's a whole different dimension to this town, which is
Yeah.
kind of fascinating. If any of your listeners have seen the Richard Gere movie, it adds a new dimension to it.
Mm. How did you stumble upon this story? And then like what cuz like is this your first documentary or not?
Yeah, first.
Okay. So
Yeah.
you do the podcast. This is your first actual documentary.
Yep.
So what when you're like looking at stories to do a podcast about or a documentary, what's the thing that makes you go, "Oh, I'm going to make this now." Like what about this story made you go like, cuz I'm sure you had a couple different ones you were thinking about doing, like what made you pick this one specifically?
Um, the mixture of murkiness with the arts, with
Mm.
strange, mysterious story. Why was this film not released? Mothman by Doug TenNapel. No answers as to why it wasn't released. rumors on the internet that he was scared of talking about it. He pretty much had admitted it himself that he just didn't want to talk about it, that it scared him thinking about it. And I can see why now with hindsight. But that element of it, the sheer mysteriousness of it, combined with the fact it was, they were making a fictional horror slash comedy film in West Virginia, for me was a kind of nice combination of that sort of creepy, strange, whatever you want to call it, content, potentially true crime content, blended with the creative arts. And that's kind of what my Substack blog and my podcast, Commendable Commotion, that's kind of the angle it often goes for, is where the sort of true crime content blends with the creative arts subject matter in life. So that's kind of what interested me most. It's a difficult question because there are many things about it that interested me so much, but that was a big part of it. And yeah, so I just went from there. During the pandemic, I reached out to the producer, one of the producers, Jay Holben, who's now a filmmaker in his own right, and he told me this very strange stuff about, the crew getting death threats while they were in Point Pleasant back in the day, and that set me off on the journey. I found that, some of those articles I mentioned earlier about the Wheeling Mob and, from 2015, those sorts of articles I found soon afterwards. So yeah, it's been quite a long journey, and premiered at last year's Mothman Festival for attendees who were there, just one showing, and then arranging distribution stuff. And I decided, I think I'll just put it on the Substack, pop it up there for, $5 subscribers, just easy, just get it done, might as well.
Yeah.
I'm not Steven Spielberg, I'm just an amateur, so might as well, no problem, don't need to necessarily go through all the distribution arrangements or formal kind of thing as some companies might, but I'm open to further distribution options. But for now, come this Sunday, everyone will be able to see it just on the Substack for $5. I think that's the best way of doing it for the moment, at least.
Yeah. Is it? I was. I thought it was really cool how on the doc it felt like you got everyone. Like, were you surprised how many people were down to interview for it?
Not too surprised, as I was thinking. I was kind of surprised that Doug TenNapel was willing to be interviewed. It took a while. The director of the film and writer and all that, it was kind of the film was the brainchild of Doug TenNapel. I was surprised that he eventually was like, yeah, sure, okay, I'll do an interview, because it took a while. He I think wanted to stand back and just see how it was going. He knew that people from his crew were being interviewed and contacted by me. He was fine with it. He just kind of wanted to sit back and see what happens. And then eventually, I was occasionally in touch with him. And then eventually he said, yeah, okay, sure, let's just do it. And he gave a very gracious interview, and we talked for a while, and it was a very interesting conversation. And so I was surprised by that. In terms of the other crew, though, I wasn't too surprised. I mean, at the end of the day, if you're doing a project about the making of a film, be it a horror film or whatever, it's easier to approach people about the project you're doing, because
Yeah.
it's it's a bit different from, I don't know, like, oh, I'm doing let's say you go up to someone, oh, I'm doing a podcast about, the attempted assassination of
Yeah.
in Butler, Pennsylvania, of Donald Trump in 2024. That's just such a fiery topic, and also an equally mysterious topic. But with something like the making of a film, it's just a bit easier to kind of,
That's a
play
good point.
safe that way. Yeah.
It's a good point with the film. It's kind of like, hey, do you guys want to talk about this? It sounds like it was pretty scary in the moment, but it's probably a fun story to tell now that you have
Yeah.
like distance from it. So now, because that was the part I liked about it, because like you make a good point with depending on what the topic is, because you'll see documentaries on Netflix where they'll have these like really big complex topics, and you're like, did you got like 5 people to interview? So when I'm watching yours and I see like the whole crew is there, I was like, this is cooler, because it feels like you're getting a much more like comprehensive like breakdown. Like in a lot of docs they'll be like, oh, here's the like here's they'll find like a writer at a newspaper who's like an analyst for certain topics, but in here you're like, oh, we have the guys that were there. We have the guy that got threatened by the weirdos in the town and stuff like that.
Oh
Um,
yeah, yeah, a lot of threats back then that the crew had from a select few people. Most of the locals were very welcoming, but yeah, a lot of threats, a lot of threats.
yeah. When you're making the doc, when you're like doing the interviews, is it do you do you like go into those interviews with like broad questions and then the documentary slowly starts to form the more interviews you do? Like how do you do you, like when do you start seeing like the story specifically? Is it after a bunch of interviews or do you kind of know what you're going into with making it?
That's a very good question. I have a core idea of what the general subject matter is. You know, in this case, it was, okay, the crew making their film, why wasn't it released? But I didn't have any, like, specific fixed ideas about, like, what the story as a whole is. That was where the interviews and the research came into play because I was just going by what people were telling me and then seeing if I could find any corroboration for that, which was important because obviously, as you know yourself, true factual storytelling isn't having a agenda or a kind of fixed view and going having that be the driving thing. True factual storytelling, as you and Ken know, is and your co-host as well knows, sort of seeing what the story is, trying to see if there's any evidence for that, and going with the flow, as it were. And it's tremendously important and very enjoyable too.
Nice. Yeah, no, I think that's a good method because you see that a lot of times with the more poorly done documentaries. I know my wife's really into the what's the term, the murder porn or whatever they call it now.
Oh yeah.
My wife's really into that, and I swear every documentary they have on those, it'll be like someone else coming out to be like, well, they didn't interview this person and that person, and they were biased and stuff like that. So it is a good. I appreciate hearing that you're kind of like you're waiting because that is the way I feel like documentaries should be is like you kind of have a broad idea, but you let the story tell itself to you rather than you formulating the story.
Exactly, exactly. That's my opinion too. I mean, I had no idea that I'd be using the word mafia when talking about this story. I don't know. I didn't know why the crew were scared when they went to Point Pleasant in the 90s. I just didn't know why. I heard mumblings that they were scared, on one or two internet forums, like on the old IMDb forums, I think, before they got taken down because IMDb doesn't have forums anymore, unfortunately. But there were mumblings that they were scared, but it was unclear why. And so I had no idea that it was going to lead me to this Pittsburgh Mafia connection in Point Pleasant, which, as I said, as far as we know, kind of died out in the early 2000s in terms of the local arm of it in Point Pleasant.
Yeah.
Um, so, I had no idea that any of that was going to be brought up. So, yeah, I just kind of went with where the story took me, that kind of thing.
Do you
It
have
was
any?
a
Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just saying it was a fascinating but weird experience.
Do you have any plans of going more into the Ohio mob stuff because I thought that was very interesting, but it did seem like the story's obviously more based around the film crew and stuff, but I actually no, it was funny. I remember hearing a while ago about like the Ohio mob from something I was watching a while ago, but I didn't know anything about it. And you reminded me, I was like, oh yeah, like there's definitely people think like, oh, mob, big cities, like, oh, it's in New York or Chicago or whatever the hell. They think that, and you're like, nah, man, they're like, where would be the best place, one of the best places for the mobs to be? In a small town where they can do whatever they want and not have to worry about, a big police presence. So I found the whole Ohio mob angle. Did you like have a lot into that you just were like it doesn't make sense to be in the movie, or is there any plans to maybe go into that more in the future? Because I found it very interesting.
Well, yeah, thank you. And even though a lot of it is about the film crew, there is a lot about the Ohio mob and their counterparts in the Pittsburgh mob and what they were doing in Point Pleasant back in the day. There was quite a lot of that in the documentary, but there was also stuff, as you point out, that I just couldn't fit in there, mainly because of time and structural reasons, that kind of thing. And so I will make use of that at some point in the future. We'll see. Might put some more stuff up there in the future from, on my Substack, delving into some of the very strange side stories of the mob's activities in Point Pleasant back in the day, drawing upon, as the impetus of kind of what the people were telling me that you'll see in the documentary, So from that, I might expand a bit more in some subscriber exclusive Substack articles after the documentary, Not sure when, but they will be relatively soon in the future. So there'll be quite a bit coming in that regard. Yeah. So it is an interesting topic. Now, the Ohio Mafia, you mentioned you were watching something. I don't know, was this guy involved with them? But was he connected to them in some way? Maybe you can remind me. Danny Green of Cleveland, Ohio. Do you remember him?
No, name doesn't ring a bell.
They made a film about him. I'm just trying to remember what the name of the film was. It was Benicio del Toro in the film. Yeah, Danny Green. He died. He got killed. There was some sort of drug war or like a mob war in Cleveland in the 70s, and Danny Green was one of the main figures in it. So that was Cleveland, Ohio. So this was
it's Kill the Irishman.
Yeah. That's the movie. I remember now. Kill the Irishman. That's the eerily.
I can see that sticking in your head.
That's kind of creepy. I'm going to look around my shoulder now every few seconds.
Yeah,
that was it.
I was reading the name of a movie. I was not making a statement, just so everyone knows.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, Kill the Irishman. That's the movie. That's based on a book, I believe. And Danny Green. So that was the Ohio Mafia. I don't know, was he in the Ohio Mafia? But he was in the sort of, I think he was on the opposing side. I haven't really looked into the story much of that Danny Green situation. But that was the sort of stuff the Ohio Mafia were doing: blowing people up, assassinating people, running drugs, illegal gambling, which is a huge part, from what I've been told, of what was happening in Point Pleasant back in the day. Huge. I mean, there was other stuff as well, but that was the real. There was a lot of money coming from that, from what the locals told me, and where the money was going to. Well, that's you'll get some insights of that into the documentary, and some of the people who were aware of what was going on back in the day, sadly, but either couldn't do anything about it or were maybe going along with it, or who knows. But people in the town, some of them who, kind of shocking now that I think about it. But most people were not involved in it. It was just a select few people in the Pittsburgh mob's orbit.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, that's the interesting thing I've noticed about mob shit is they kind of like roll in and they're kind of like, we're going to do this. And it's like, and usually like, they're definitely doing their thing, but in like the best case scenario, they're doing their thing over there with the people who are involved in that thing. So it's kind of a thing of like, hey, we're going to do this here. If you guys, are cool about it, we won't be a problem. So it is this odd thing where I feel like it just creates this like weird tension going on in there. It's an interesting dynamic. No, and I know that stuff develops in interesting areas where I used to live in Pennsylvania, over in this area in the Poconos. There's this area called the Poconos, and there's this area right there called East Stroudsburg. And if you drive through, it just looks like a middle of nowhere town in Pennsylvania. But there was actually a lot of drug problems and like a lot of drug trafficking, because it just happened to be an area where New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania, the highways intersected. So it would be like a big stop-off place for a lot of people with their drugs and stuff. There's an area in Atlanta where like 10 highways all intervene at one spot, and just by the sheer fact of that, it was like a big reason people were stopping off over there. Was there, from what you were learning, was there like an element of that to go on with this area, Point Pleasant in Ohio, or did it feel random why they picked that town?
It quickly became kind of clear as to why they apparently picked that town for their illegal gambling and drug operations, among other things. Point Pleasant, as people who are familiar with the Mothman legend and the Richard Gere film will know, is on the Ohio River. It's sort of where points meet, and it's bordering Ohio, and on the border between Ohio and West Virginia. There's a lot of cargo and stuff and coal that gets brought down the river. Some lovely shots of that in the documentary, but anyway, and it's sort of you'll see a lot of that. And there was a report I found early on while making this documentary, not a newspaper report, but a report by the not the Pennsylvania State Police. I think it was the West Virginia State Police. They said that they had been informed. It was just one line mentioning that they had been informed that cocaine was being transported across the river from Ohio to specifically Point Pleasant, West Virginia. There was no further information. It was just one line mentioned that in passing. About drug trafficking generally in the kind of tri-state region. But that was kind of interesting in light of what I later heard from the locals and what some of the crew from the film in Los Angeles told me. So there were reasons like that. Things like I'd have to take a moment and think what other reasons Point Pleasant specifically. If you look into, other work that some other people have done, like Tanner Boyle of the Substack blog Getting Spooked, he's talked a bit about how there was quite a lot of union activity in the 1960s, trade union people, and some clashes involved with that or something. It's a fascinating story, and Tanner brings up the possibility that, the whole idea of the men in black in the Mothman legend, with their hats and their suits going around stalking anyone who's seen a UFO, all that kind of thing. Tanner came up with the possibility, as other people sometimes bring up as well, that maybe these weren't aliens dressed as humans. Maybe it was something a bit more down to earth. Maybe it was people who kind of, were trying to enforce certain activities or try and quell certain activities involving, be it trade unions, be it whatever. And I think that's very interesting in light of what we know now, or that people will know from watching my documentary that comes out on Sunday on Commendable Commotion. Because, well, superficially, a man in black and someone dressed as a mafia member wear similar clothes stereotypically, don't they? So it's kind of an interesting little kind of thing. I don't know. I have no idea, obviously, what was up with that Men in Black stuff. That was in the 1960s. But the 1960s... Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No. I mean, it makes sense. Like I've been rereading Whitney Webb's book, One Nation Under Blackmail, and a big thing in the first book. I haven't read the second one yet, but in the first book, the big point she's trying to make is she's showing you all these connections between government and organized crime, and it's like there's so many examples, like where the government basically goes like, well, we need this done, but we can't have it on the books. And they hit up the mafia or different organized crime organizations. And like you just said, you're like, mafia guys, they wear very similar outfits to the stereotypical Men in Black and stuff. So I don't know a lot about these specific stories you're saying, but based off of other things I know, I go, I could see it. It's one of those.
Yeah, I mean, I'd encourage people to read Tanner's series because I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I think it was like a 10-part series he did on what was going on in the Point Pleasant area in the 60s with the Mothman legend, the Men in Black, all that weirdness that was coalescing in the 60s. So people should read that. But one thing I remember is that, Tanner pointed out one of the people who came across the Men in Black supposedly in the 60s in the Point Pleasant area, his immediate thought was that it was the mob, that the mob were after him. But there was no elaboration why this person thought that in the book that he was quoted in. But Tanner pointed out that the fact there's no elaboration, he just immediately thought it was the mob. This guy from West Virginia thought that was interesting, and it made Tanner maybe think, well, why? Why the mob specifically? I mean, so things like that kind of, that's one little story. Now, the TNT area, as people familiar with the legend will know, the TNT area is sort of a former military munitions site in the forest just outside the town of Point Pleasant. That was where a lot of the Mothman sightings supposedly happened, all that kind of thing. And I was told, and this will, this will be explained in the documentary and told in the documentary, whatever. But some of the crew from Los Angeles who went there in the 90s told me that they were told that drugs were being cultivated in the TNT area by the mob, and so there were people not happy that they were there in the town with cameras and in the TNT area with cameras. There's a lot of footage that I've been given that I'm very pleased will be included in the documentary this Sunday, of the TNT area in the 90s, of the town in the 90s, including some video evidence of those spanking new gambling machines that suddenly were turning up in very decrepit places for some reason. Things like that, which on their own aren't, they're weird, but whatever. But it's then when you listen to what these locals describe and what the crew from LA describe, then you begin to see, well, okay, maybe that's why that particular spanking new gambling machine is in this rickety old little, I won't say where specifically, but you'll see in the documentary. It's a significant place. It's a place of significance, let's put it that way. And so, things like that make a lot of people scratch their heads,
Yeah. Yeah, it's all very interesting, and that's like the best. Everything about this is interesting and weird. I think it's the best way to put it. One thing I wanted to ask from a production standpoint, I was very curious because I've done video editing and stuff in the past, and it's enjoyable, but over the years I've realized I like this because I talk to you, we have a good time. I'll throw an intro on or something and then I post it online. I've done editing before, but it's the different drafts you have to do. I'm very curious, how many versions of this documentary did you make before you were like, that one's good?
Oh, couldn't give you an exact number, but I'd say the version shown at the Mothman Festival last year is fundamentally the same, but a lot of new stuff has been added in since then. A lot of improvements stylistically and narratively, but also extra content relating to the mafia's activity in supposedly Mothman town of Point Pleasant, West Virginia. A lot of new information, new footage as well, from the 90s, that kind of thing. So at least 2 different versions, but in terms of in between that, I couldn't tell you. Just a lot of different edits for logistical reasons, sound reasons, things you'd expect. And the music was enjoyable, actually, putting in. I might as well bring that up now. The guy who wrote the music is a fella named Wing Flanagan. And some of you might recognize his name. He appeared in Robert Stack's Unsolved Mysteries back in the 90s. And I interviewed him on my podcast just about his filmmaking career that he's done since then. And he very kindly just offered, I asked him, would you be interested in doing the soundtrack for this Mothman documentary? And he was like, yeah. And he just loves composing music, like what you were mentioning about making podcasts. And he very kindly did it, and I'm really pleased. It's some great stuff. And so you'll hear all that on Sunday, the result of his work. It's really good stuff. Yeah, that's Wing Flanagan. And yeah, a lot of people helped out with this, and it's been a great experience. And but yeah, different versions of the film, sure, but I can't tell you how many. A lot of editing.
Yeah.
It was just for purely logistical reasons, sound, music, stuff like that. Just because, editing on iMovie, editing just on the free version of iMovie, not on Final Cut Pro or DaVinci or anything like that. No.
Was the version I saw on iMovie?
Yeah, all edited on iMovie. Yeah.
Really?
Oh
Wow.
yeah. Mm.
Props.
Uh,
I was like I couldn't even tell. That's no, because I used to do that. I used to do that all the time back in the day. Because like when I was younger, I would do way more editing like this. Not like full documentaries, but like I would do way more editing, and then I just got into like just strict streaming and like podcasting way more. And yeah, I would go. I remember the switch from I when I finally bought Final Cut Pro, the switch from iMovie to Final Cut, I was like, oh my god, I can do. So the fact that you did a whole documentary on iMovie is pretty sick. Good for you, dude.
well, I mean that's kind of exciting. Actually, I'd be interested in checking out Final Cut Pro one of these days. But certainly, I will say that yeah, it'll be hard to tell that this was only done on the free version of iMovie, and that's not because I'm super talented or anything. It was just because you know, spent a lot of time at it, and made sure it didn't look too stylized visually, that kind of thing. Not too much unnecessary color grading, anything like that.
Yeah.
Just kind of exactly. So yeah, I'm pleased that that was your reaction. I'm very honored. I'm pleased about that. So
Well, no,
it's interesting.
well, that's the I can just from working with those programs over the years, I'll notice little things here and there. Like if something it's something as simple as um like a fade in or out or like the type of text, I go, oh, that's the preset text. So yeah, I was when you just said that, I was genuinely surprised because I didn't catch a whiff of any of that shit. So
Yeah,
that
it's interesting. There's I just realized there are like 100 different fonts in the free version of iMovie. It gets a bit confusing, but yeah, if you take the time to pick out one that doesn't look too uh, artificial, it can be pretty good results. Yeah.
Oh yeah, you can do yeah. If you want to, if you just put a little bit more work into it, you can make those apps do. You can get a lot out of those apps. I'm very curious. How long have you been? So you said this is your first documentary, but you've been doing the podcast for a while. And if you guys go listen to the podcast, it's very it's still in like documentary format, just audio. How long have you been like doing stuff like this?
In the way that it's been done in the way you described, probably for the past 2 years, maybe 2 years. What are we in now? 2025. Yeah,
Yes,
two or
sir.
3 years, something like that. But yeah, in terms of the that way you described, kind of like an audio documentary. Yeah, probably the past 2 years, and I really enjoy putting that sort of stuff together. Chatting to people you get on well with is fun enough as it is, and who have interesting stories to tell. But sometimes it's also, as you know, really, really fun just putting together a kind of, you know, 40 minutes or 30 minutes, 1 hour, whatever, audio documentary,
Mm-hmm.
trying out different ways of testing the form of these kind of true crime podcast sort of productions, trying something new with them as much as I can anyway, is always kind of enjoyable. And you can see that in that one, that weird one that we did, myself and Ken was great in it and brilliant stuff in that. The Panic in Bethel Park, yes.
Mm.
A hip hop infused descent into madness, Andy, and that was quite a strange experience. So episode 2 will be coming out soon for that. But anyway, yeah, Point Pleasant, West Virginia, which has nothing to do with the Panic in Bethel Park, except being geographically quite close to Bethel Park. You're
Oh
from
yeah.
Pennsylvania, are you? You're from Pennsylvania?
Yeah, Pennsylvania. I don't. I think where the Trump assassination attempt was a little farther away from me because I think that was more closer to like Pittsburgh and shit. I can't remember though.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I was in an area called Allentown, Pennsylvania. That's much closer to the east over near like New Jersey and shit.
Oh, so you're kind of near Philadelphia, is it?
I'm about where I grew up. I'm in Texas now, but where I grew up, I was about an hour and a half away from Philadelphia, depending on, traffic and the day. So yeah,
Right. Yeah,
but
I've never been to either of those places. Austin, Texas, you mentioned living in earlier, or Pennsylvania. I've never been to either of those two, but it's interesting. I imagine they're quite different, like in the scenery and everything.
scenery, 100%. Austin, well, yeah, Philadelphia, the Philadelphia is interesting because it's like if you go to like the areas that where there's like more money and stuff, it's actually pretty similar to Austin because there's a huge transplant vibe. There's a huge vibe of like people moved here so they could do their own like little whimsical Sex in the City version of life. But then like if you go out of town, if you go out of the richer areas where it's like actual real people, Philly's a much more interesting place where you have a lot of these like it's this like blue collar city folk. It's really Philly's a very interesting place. Philly's like its own country within the United States because it's like you get everyone you meet there, they're like it's a very unique experience. And then Austin, it's the similar thing. When you're in the city of Austin, it's a bunch of people with money who are like transplants and stuff like that. And I mean, I kind of am, but I live out in the suburbs. But out in the suburbs, it's much like it's just normal people. But yeah, it's like because I've done a lot of traveling just doing stand-up comedy, and everywhere you go feels a little bit similar, but also a lot a bit different. It's kind of a weird. That's like the big thing I've learned going to different states throughout America is everywhere feels a little bit the same, but also there's like some big differences and stuff like that at the same time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. One thing I was gonna get to with the documentary questions where so you've been doing what you've been doing now for about you said 2 or 3 years, and then it sounds like you've been sort of doing things in this space for a little longer than that. I'm very curious as like a as a comedian, I've been doing stand-up comedy for like 13 years or so. And when I first started, like social media was around, but it didn't have as big of an influence on it didn't have as big of an influence on your career. Now, like I could make a couple short sketches on TikTok or Instagram, they blow up. I get a bunch of followers. My career's in like when Instagram and TikTok didn't matter when I don't even think TikTok was around when I started, but like now it's kind of a thing that all comics are like aware of where it's like, oh, I also got to post stuff on Instagram or TikTok. Like, I wonder, have you experienced a like big dynamic shift? Like, what would like is because I guess there's probably stuff when you first started doing this stuff that you're like, oh, I wish I could get that. That now you're like, if I do, I do. If I don't, I don't. Like, what's like the big shifts you've noticed? The question I was asking was basically like, so I know you've been doing the documentary filmmaking and the audio podcasting stuff for a minute now. And I'm just kind of curious, like, because I'm obviously not in that world. I'm very curious what the like noticeable shifts are. So like a big thing in comedy is like everyone would have killed back when I started to get on late night. Like that would change their career. And now like it'd be way better to get there's some podcasts that would like affect your career 10 times more than any late night set would. So not knowing a whole lot about like the documentary space, I'm very curious what like the bigger shifts are and sort of like what's the thing now that you're like, oh, if I got that, if I got A, B, and C, it would really help. Da da da. I'm very curious about that.
I'm curious about that too, and you know, distribution wise, that kind of thing. I'm familiar with it when it comes to like things like other career ambitions, but in terms of filmmaking and podcasting, all that sort of thing, I agree. It's a very complex and opaque kind of topic as to how does a filmmaker or a podcaster or a stand-up comedian such as yourself, how I don't know if there's a way of knowing. At least the way I feel about the filmmaking stuff for me is that I don't know, and I just go where the flow takes me. I have other career ambitions as well that I balance my
Mm.
time doing both, that kind of thing. And I just sort of that is clearer about how you do it. For example, in some cases, as in my case, you're in college doing a degree, that kind of thing. With filmmaking, it seems, and podcasting, or stand-up comedy, as you said, it seems to be a bit more complex and unclear, you
Yeah.
know. It's it's an insecure environment. It can be, which is why I wouldn't just rely only on those things. In my case,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of making money and stuff. Now, for other people, maybe such as yourself, it's fine. But I'm just in my case, I don't know. I don't know what it's just sort of a go with the flow thing, and I have other ways of my livelihood coming into, which is good, which are clearer about how to get there, which I'm pleased about. But filmmaking, podcasting, all that stuff, yeah, I don't know. It seems like some of it is just how do you
Yeah.
measure if people like your product? It's
Yeah.
sometimes difficult to tell, but people will like this one coming out on Sunday. I like your podcast very much indeed. I enjoyed that
Well, thank you very
those
much.
couple of interviews with Ken and some other ones you did, and you've got the No More Heroes podcast, which is a film one you mentioned to me, was it?
Yeah, we were kind of bouncing around on different subjects, and we realized because we would just do casual conversations. Then we got really into doing research on specific topics, and then we realized we were taking on like big topics like conspiracies or stuff like that, and we're like, that's really hard to research in a week. And then we're like, what's a little bit more manageable? Doing a movie every week. So we accidentally stumbled into a movie podcast. So No More Heroes is kind of a movie podcast. Yeah.
It's also the name of a really weird video game.
Yeah. I realized
Yeah.
that after I made the title. The name isn't completely linked to what the topic is anymore. It was literally, when I first started, it was literally me talking about current events. And I was listening to this band I like called Knock Loose. And then they're a heavy, like a hardcore / like metal band, and they have this one lyric where they say all my heroes went to hell, and it like really stuck out to me. So I kind of like reformed it to say no more heroes in the context of like thinking about politics, about how like you grow up and you find out a lot of people are full of shit. So it was kind of a thing like that, and then over time the podcast just developed into a movie podcast. So I don't even know if the name really, it's just the name though. So I don't know if it really applies. But yeah, I've done that with a couple of my podcasts, because I have the other one called Drag the Lake. That's a music podcast. And then I found out it was the name of like a band song that I've never listened to the band. I only did it because it was like lyrics I liked. But yeah, I got a couple podcasts. But yeah, No More Heroes is the movie podcast now.
Do you blend the sort of true crime with movies in No More Heroes, or do you leave that as a separate podcast, for example?
The true crime stuff, we intertwine that if it like, because like we were doing some movies, like how like Apocalypse Now had like a crazy story on set, and then
Yeah.
we did some movies like that. So if there's like some extra shit intertwined with that, we actually did one episode when we were doing more conspiracy stuff where we did. This actually might be where the movie stuff started, because we did an episode about because we were doing conspiracy. We're like, did the Illuminati kill Stanley Kubrick? Like we were tackling that conspiracy,
Right.
which the joke I always make about that is I go, Google a picture of Stanley Kubrick and tell me that dude couldn't have just died in the middle of the night for no reason. Like he has the all respect to his filmmaking, but he's got that face. But yeah, no. Then so we were checking that out, and then we were watching Eyes Wide Shut, and then the podcast was like us going, yeah, that probably didn't happen. Anyway, let's talk about Eyes Wide Shut, and we just ended up we stumbled into a movie podcast via trying to figure out a conspiracy theory if it was true or not.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Now, I haven't listened to that one. I'm going to listen to that one now. So, how many did you do on Kubrick and Eyes Wide Shut? Just one or
Just
two? How
one,
many?
just
Okay.
one episode. I think because we usually go for an hour and a half or so. So we just did the one episode, because it was like there's a lot of these conspiracies that float. Like a lot of the smaller conspiracies, they'll float around line and they sound fun. And then if you do a little bit of digging, you're like, this is unlikely. It's
Yeah.
cool. It's cool to say Kubrick. Well, because even that one, they were like, oh, he edited out 20 minutes of of like a crazy satanic ritual where they like murdered children, and you're like, okay, so first of all, that's a snuff film, and what studio's gonna let Kubrick leave that in anyway? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, exactly.
regardless of the Illuminati being like, you're giving away our secrets, you're like, what studio's just gonna leave a snuff film? You know what I mean? Like, Eyes Wide Shut is about rich people and their weird sexual proclivities, and then for 20 minutes they're gonna show a human sacrifice. And then yeah, it was just, you go through the rest of it and you're like, it's probably not what happened. You know what I mean? Now, did he fake the moon landing? That's another conversation. Anyway, but
I mean, I'm not sure about I'm not sure about the moon landing story. I try to keep away from that one. But in terms of Eyes Wide Shut, now, I mean, I did meet one of his close colleagues, who told me that there was stuff removed from the film, but nothing about a 20-minute sacrifice scene or anything bizarre like that. So
that was the thing they said. They said they had like the scene they cut was him reenacting one of their like rituals or whatever. But also, if you look at over Kubrick's life, he would usually he would make his movies, then cut out a big chunk before the theatrical release. So it was like, it was on par for him to like take out a bunch of his movie.
Yeah. Now there are some shots that I have from Eyes Wide Shut that were unused, and they've never been published by anyone. I can't publish them because I'm trying to get permission from the Kubrick estate. So if anyone's listening from the Kubrick family, let them know. Anyway,
wait, you got pictures? You got, what did you say you had? You had scenes that are unpublished.
Yeah.
How'd you get that?
From one of the Kubrick archives. They very kindly gave me permission to have them for my research purposes, but not as in like in terms of the filmmaking and podcast, that kind of stuff, but not to publish them without permission from the Kubrick estate. So I'm trying to get that permission. I need to get back onto it, actually. It's just a long, arduous process, as it is with any estate, not Kubrick specifically, I'm sure. But yeah, these are shots that weren't included in the film, and they're kind of interesting. It's been a while since I looked at them. One of them is in the kind of weird costume shop that Tom Cruise is in the film. It's a shot of him trying on a mask. So it doesn't sound particularly exciting, but it's beautifully lit, and
yeah,
it's wonderful. And the way I interpreted it personally was like, is this maybe Kubrick kind of visually kind of joking about Tom Cruise being an actor, who's always putting on a mask? And I don't know. That's just speculation, obviously. But his films are like that,
Yeah. No, and yeah, I mean, however you feel about his films, the visuals on them are unreal.
Yeah, they're very the vibe is kind of like the vibe I get of that film, particularly Eyes Wide Shut. The creepy vibe is very much kind of what I felt sometimes while doing this Mothman documentary and other work as well, like the Panic in Bethel Park, that kind of thing. Very strange, unknown elements of a story, which we're both interested in, as you know. And one thing that might be interesting to, because I do have to go soon, but one thing that might be interesting to leave for you and your listeners, one of the people interviewed in Mothman, the film that never was, a local of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, a local official, recently his organization, or his local community organization in the town, came under investigation by the West Virginia State Police. And I just think that's a nice note to leave it on, because I had no idea. I mean, this happened after I interviewed him. And this guy is he's the head of the Economic Development Authority in the town. Big figure now. There's no evidence he's done anything wrong. But his organization, which he was in charge of, the Development Authority, came under investigation recently. I don't know how that's going. So I just thought that was kind of interesting, because, I had no idea that would happen when I was interviewing this fella in his office, this local official, back in 2023. He said he knew nothing about the mafia. And that very well could be true. I don't know what they're investigating his organization for these days. But yeah, a lot of other locals had a lot of stories to tell about the mob,
Yeah.
So
And I definitely think if you have the time, getting more into the Ohio mob and stuff, I would, if I could encourage you to do anything, it would, because that I found that part very fascinating. So definitely getting into that way more would be cool as hell.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, this was awesome. Just remind people one last time where they can check out your stuff, and the whole deal.
Well, Commendable Commotion, which is my Substack, and it's a blog and a podcast. The documentary is going to be released there in full this Sunday, just for monthly subscribers, which is just $5 is the minimum. I'd happily have it be lower, but that's the minimum Substack allows. So anyone who becomes a monthly subscriber to Commendable Commotion Substack will be able to watch the full film when it drops on this Sunday. So that's where people can find me, and I hope people enjoy it. And you can find a link to my Substack through stuff like X, or Twitter as it used to be called, and through YouTube as well. But it'll all lead to the Substack, which is where Mothman, the film that never was, is going to be this Sunday. So yeah, that's where people can find me.
Hell yeah. And I'll put a link for it down in the description, in the comments and stuff. Matthew, thank you so much. This was a great interview, brother.
I really enjoyed it now, very much so. I knew I would. You got a lot of knowledge, so a lot of knowledge about film and all these different strange topics. So thank you very much indeed. And have a great evening or morning. What is it there?
It's still morning for me, but I think you're about ready for dinner, because I think it was like 3 p.m. your time when we started, right? It's probably like 4:30 now. Damn, that's so funny, dude. That's the hardest part. That's the hardest part about doing these, where I'll schedule something. I happened to me like 2 weeks ago. I scheduled something, then I hit up the guy I was interviewing. I go, "Wait, what time is it where you are?" I'm ready, but if it's like 2 hours behind, we'll go whenever you're good. And it's like I keep messing up because I'm still in East Coast time zone, and I keep forgetting I live in Texas.
Right. Yeah. It's confusing, the whole time zone thing. I had a chocolate muffin before doing this, so don't worry. I'm not too hungry. It was a tasty muffin, so don't worry about it. It was a great conversation. I enjoyed it now, so I hope you enjoyed the film, and I hope your viewers enjoy the film when it drops on Sunday.
They will. Check out Mothman, the film that never was. Have a great day, brother.